I am going to share with you guys just a small portion of my own faith journey over the past few years and how I've grown in my relationship and closeness with God and how dark of a place it once was. I was born and raised here in Westphalia, very devout Catholic family, and growing up, that was just a way of life. Going to Mass, praying on a regular basis, and but during high school, I slipped a lot, and I fell into a lifestyle of sin and just evil. And the main reason for that was alcohol. I started drinking heavily right when I turned 16, as soon as I got my license. Looking back, I'm certainly not proud of it, but it consumed me in a big way and took over my life for the better part of 10 years. From about 2008 to 2018, getting as drunk as possible and partying was really the only thing that I cared about and the only thing that I wanted to do. And naturally, I fell away from God in a big way. I continued going to Mass every weekend during that time. That is the one thing that never changed. Deep down, I knew that, I can't miss Mass. But there was nothing else good spiritually that was present during that time. There was no prayer. There was no relationship with God. Faith was the last thing on my mind. I would check that weekly obligation, that checkbox of going to Mass, and that was it in regards to my faith. At that time, looking back, it's incredible that I was never killed or that I didn't die during that time, because the amount of reckless and careless and stupid things that I did for that 10-year span was unbelievable. I was drinking and driving nonstop. I was, like I said, careless, reckless, didn't care about anybody else, didn't care about other people. Absolutely destroyed my relationship with my parents and family. And there was one person who kept intervening, kept popping up every now and then, and that was the Blessed Virgin Mary. So I don't remember what year it was. It was at some point when I was in high school, but one night I had this dream. And I'm not someone who usually puts much stock or credibility into dreams, but this one was so vivid and so eventually impactful that there's not a doubt in my mind that it happened for a reason. So one night, when I was a teenager in high school, in the midst of this sinful, alcoholic lifestyle, I have this dream about this statue of Mary. And it was a beautiful statue. I was just standing there looking at it, and all of a sudden, this statue starts crying tears of blood. And I actually spoke with someone recently about this, whose opinion I respect immensely, and they told me that after doing some research, this dream actually isn't that uncommon. And what it's widely believed to signify is that you're on the doorstep of hell. And honestly, that's probably where I was at that time. I was the furthest away from the faith that I've ever been. I was drunk 24/7, had no relationship with God or with family, and I was in one of the darkest places that I've ever been in. And yet, this dream didn't cause me to change my lifestyle at all. I continued drinking heavily, doing incredibly stupid stuff, had several run-ins with the law during these years. I spent the night before my last day of high school in jail. It was just one stupid and careless and reckless thing after another. But, as we talked about earlier, God and Mary never stop reaching out to you. So a few years later, one day, I'm going through this old closet, or this old dresser in my closet, and I find tucked way in the back a Mary scapular. I had never seen it before, didn't know whose it was, didn't know where it came from, but I read what was engraved on it. And it said, "Whoever dies wearing this brown scapular shall not suffer eternal fire." Mary's promise. And at that time, in those years, I thought a lot about, if I were to die young, it would be, without a doubt, in a car accident, probably drunk. And if that's the case, I'm more than likely going to go to hell. And so I see this scapular, and basically it's Mary saying that she wants to protect whoever wears it. And, I didn't think much of it, but I would wear it anytime I would drive a long distance. I just felt safe. There was a comfort level, a sense of security there anytime I would wear it. But with that being said, I still wasn't growing at all in my relationship with God or changing my lifestyle at all. So fast forward a few years, I graduate from high school, move away to Eastern Michigan University in Ypsilanti in southeast Michigan, and college is when the sins and the parties just got bigger and a lot more severe. And I was still engulfed in this lifestyle. And, I thought it was what would make me happy. And looking back, obviously that was not the case because I was not happy at all. But one night during my senior year of college, I had yet another interaction, if you will, with Mary. It was on a cold winter night in January or February of 2016. I was driving around with some friends near an airport in Ypsilanti. Probably a few hundred yards away from the airport, there was this deserted stretch of land. There was really nothing there, no buildings, no people, nothing there except for a handful of chain-linked fences. And for whatever reason, it was real late at night, me and my friends decided to just go drive around in this area. So we're driving up and down these tall rows of chain-linked fences. It's late at night, it's pitch black, there's no light around except for the lights from the vehicle's headlights. So we're driving down one of the rows of fences, and as we turn to go around the next row, all of a sudden my buddy who was driving hits the brakes. And directly in front of us in the vehicle's headlights was this statue of Mary. It was an all-white statue, probably 3 or 4 feet tall, and she had her arms outstretched and her palms facing upward. There were 4 of us in the vehicle, 2 of my friends from college, and then me and my girlfriend at the time, and all 4 of us froze. Nobody said a word. And basically, we turned the vehicle around and we went straight home. To this day, I have no clue why that statue was there or what it was doing there, but I have a hard time believing that it just wound up there for no reason. This was, like I said, 8 years ago in 2016, and I still was not close with God. I didn't trust Him. I had no trust in Jesus. I didn't love Him. I had no trust. And it wasn't long after I graduated from college where finally I started realizing, at least a little bit, the importance of faith and how you have to live for something bigger than yourself. It was probably in 2019 and 2020 when my faith finally started becoming a bigger part of my life, and I was finally ready to put the partying lifestyle behind me and basically start growing up and realizing that you do have to live for something bigger than yourself and believe in a higher being. And so, like I said, probably about 4 or 5 years ago is when my faith started becoming at least somewhat of a significant part of my life. But with that being said, there was still no trust. I didn't trust God. I would like to think I did, but looking back, there's no question that was still not the case. And this was evident 2 years ago. 2 years ago, on February 10th, 2022, my life changed forever. I didn't know it that night, but looking back, it's clear as day to me now. It was a Thursday, I was finally invested in my faith at this point, in a big way. I had progressed immensely in my relationship with Christ. It was something that I had a desire for, and was happy that I finally developed that closeness with God. And sure enough, with Mary, she was still she was becoming a bigger and bigger part of my life. And so, 2 years ago, February 10th, 2022, I was praying for something that I had never prayed for harder before in my life. I was kind of in a bad place, just not my faith, but just otherwise mentally. And I really got the urge that I needed to turn to Mary, where it's like, okay, Mary, I'm begging you to basically give me what I'm praying for. And so I really got the sense that I need to do something more than just say a few prayers every day. I would say like a Hail Mary and an Our Father here and there, and that was about it in terms of my prayer life. And I really got the sense that I needed to say the rosary. And so at the time, I was never saying it. I'll be honest, I did not like it. I thought it was repetitive, I thought it was long, I thought it was boring. And the thought of saying it, just like I dreaded it. But on the evening of Thursday, February 10th, 2022, I laid down that night and I had a long conversation with Mary about what I was praying for. And then I said the rosary for the first time in a very, very long time. And then I figured it would be, a 2 or 3 day thing where I said it again the following day and the day after that. But the plan was that would be it. This isn't something that's going to stick. And so what I had been praying for immensely, I did not get. And I was furious. I was angry at God and at Mary. And it was clear how much I did not trust them. I thought they were making the wrong decision because they did not give me what I wanted. And like I said, I was angry, I was down about it, and yet I had this strong sense that I need to keep saying the rosary. Even though I didn't get what I was praying for, this daily habit of saying the rosary needs to continue. And so what I thought would be a 3-day thing turned into a 2+ year thing to this day. And saying it every day has completely changed my life. It's changed my mindset. It's changed my relationship with God. And perhaps most importantly, it's allowed trust and love in God to develop and eventually flourish. And so like I said in February of 2 years ago, that trust was not strong. It was not as prevalent as it should be. But when it really occurred to me that it's at a place that it should be was this past summer. I had a chance to go to Lisbon, Portugal for World Youth Day with 17 people from Westphalia. And it was an amazing, amazing trip. We went for 10 days. We walked the streets of Lisbon, Portugal, visited all kinds of old cathedrals and all sorts of things, and it was just an amazing, amazing trip. And toward the end of the trip was when one of the highlights was going to occur. And what that was Mass with the Pope outside. The plan was to hike to this location where the Pope would be saying Mass, and then everybody would basically camp out there. He would say Mass at night, and then we would stay overnight and basically sleep outside under the stars. And so that day rolls around where it's time to make the hike to the place where the Pope was saying Mass. And so it is 100 degrees on this day. It was this past August, and it's a 15-mile hike. And so the 17 of us set out along the coast. Portugal's right on the ocean, and we're hiking to this spot. 1.5 million people were there making this trip, all to this one location. So it is absolutely packed. The first 12 or 13 miles went great. By the time we hit probably about mile 13 or so, one of the people in our group, he said I could use his name, Grant Hankspa, Bob and Paula Hanks' son, all of a sudden is in very bad shape physically. And he's like, we need to stop. He's like, I cannot go on. And at this point, we are up on this bridge. And so we're isolated on this tall bridge. We're very close to our destination, but we weren't there quite yet. And so Grant sits down at this spot, and me and 3 others in our group sit down with him, while the rest of the group, the 14 or so others, kept going on to the destination. And Grant is basically, the longer he sits there, the worse he's getting. He's throwing up. He's borderline in and out of consciousness. And it's obvious he's overheated and looks like he's having a heat stroke. And again, there's 1.5 million people around. So people are dropping like flies around us at this point. And so finally we get a medic over to us. And we're like, he needs help immediately. Like, he needs a doctor, he needs to get to the hospital. And this medic is like, it'll be 5 hours before an ambulance gets here. We can't possibly get one up here any sooner. And, you know, we're worried at this point. He's not looking good. He says, you know, he's in horrible shape physically. And eventually, we asked one of the medics, me and the 2 other people who were staying with him, what we should do. Like, what can we do for him to help him? And she looked at us with very obvious fear in her eyes. And all she said was, just pray. All you can do is pray at this point. And that's when it got real. That's when it's like, holy cow, like, this is not good. Again, we're up high, isolated on this bridge where we have no access to basically any medical attention other than this medic who's running around trying to help people. And so I decided to stay with Grant while the 2 or 3 others who had also been staying with us left. They went ahead to the campsite where everybody else was. So it is just Grant and I on this bridge for the next probably 3 or 4 hours. And so I'm just sitting with him. He would like doze off, like I said, in and out of consciousness. And I'm sitting down basically on the side of the bridge with him. And so finally, 4 or 5 hours later, an ambulance shows up. And they get him inside. And I'm like, okay, good. He's going to be in good shape and we'll be good to go. And so I've been sitting for a long time, several hours. And I get up and I realize that I can't stand. I can't put any weight on my left leg. I look down, and what had started out as like a small rash or something near my left ankle, just a discoloration, like a redness, had spread completely up my left leg. And again, I realized that I can't stand on it. And so I tell the medic, I'm like, I don't know what this is. Like, I can't walk. And then she's like, you need to get in the ambulance too. And so I get in with Grant, and we are rushed to this medical tent a few miles away. And so they're driving us to this medical tent. And, you know, me and Grant are in the back of this ambulance. And at one point, in the midst of all this chaos, he was conscious at this point, we looked at each other, made eye contact, and we just started laughing. We're like, what is going on? Like, this is crazy. It was a bad situation, and, you know, he was making the most of it. I think at one point I took out my phone and I started taking pictures. I'm like, you want to take a selfie? And so we finally get to this medical tent, and if anyone has seen the old show MASH about the Vietnam War, you know how they would have like those run-down medical tents in the middle of nowhere? That's basically what this was. This old run-down tent that they put us in. And so me and Grant get separated at this point, which was a problem because most of the people in our group's cell phones weren't working. Mine was one of the few that did, his didn't. And it's like, I can't be separated from him because he's not going to have any idea how to get back to the campsite. And the doctors didn't care. They took him away and they rushed me in a different direction. And so I'm in this tent. These Portuguese doctors and nurses are looking at my leg, and they're speaking in Portuguese. And I can't understand them, but I realize that they're confused and they're like arguing somewhat. And they clearly don't know what's wrong. The discoloration had spread to my other leg at this point. And at one point, one of these Portuguese nurses comes up to me. And, well, before I get to that part, my main mindset at this point was I had a million things running through my head. It was toward the end of the trip. I'm thinking, what if I miss my flight back to America? What if this is something incredibly serious? What if it's something very bad? I think I had texted people at one point back in America to send me pictures of my insurance card because I didn't have it on me. And so this million thoughts running through my head. This Portuguese nurse comes up to me and she goes, just simply asks, "Are you nervous right now?" And all of a sudden it just completely hit me. I'm like, no, not at all. Like I had this overwhelming sense of calmness and peace. And I was not scared one bit. Even though I fully realized the potential severity of the situation. Like, what if this is something bad? And just for a split second, the thought pops into your head, what if I die? Like, what if this was it? And strangely, I was okay with that. I'm like, if this is it, if I die right here and now, like, I'm fine with that. I have completely overhauled my relationship with God and gotten in a good spot with Him, and that's all that matters. And it was the most indescribable, overwhelming sense of peace and calmness. And so eventually I was sent to a hospital in Lisbon, about an hour away from this medical tent, where I was looked at by more doctors there. And finally they said they didn't know what it was for sure, but they figured some sort of allergic reaction or bug bite or something along those lines. And they prescribed me an antibiotic. And once I got back to America, it eventually, over the next 2 weeks or so, that discoloration went away and everything turned out fine. But like I said, so much of our faith is about trust. Do you trust God? Do you trust God with your entire life? How about death? Do you trust God in death? That you know that if you're in a good spot, He'll take care of you, and that you'll wind up where you're supposed to wind up. And to legitimately trust Him the way He's calling us to is the most freeing feeling in the entire world. To know that, not even to be afraid of death. To know that whatever happens, you're in a good spot because you're right with God, and that's all that matters. And so with that in mind, we are going to have a few more people share their own personal testimony and faith journey and what it looks like to be in a good spot with God. These three people who are about to talk are incredibly inspiring. I've known one of them my whole life, and the other two I've gotten to know over the last few years. And I can honestly say that they are three of the most faith-filled and just incredible people that I've ever met. So with that in mind, please give a warm welcome to Emma Worth, Bruce George, and Renee Drusty.